Good afternoon and welcome back to the Johnson Space Center for today's mission status briefing on Atlantis' flight to the International Space Station. Another day, another EVA, and with us today to discuss the day's activities are Emily Nelson, the lead International Space Station Flight Director for STS-132, and Lisa Shore, the lead Spacewalk Officer for the mission. And we'll start off with Emily.
Thanks, Rob. Well, today was obviously EVA 2. We headed out the door a little more than 30 minutes ahead of the timeline, and that's after we shifted the entire timeline 30 minutes early to try to get a jump start on the overall sleep shift we have to do for the mission in order to have the crew awake at the right time for landing. We ran a little long with the EVA, so we ended up coming inside right on time. So we're back on our timeline at this point. The tasks that we were doing, the central task to this EVA heading into the mission were battery removal and replacements out on the P6 truss. These were really hard ahead of time, pre-flight, for us to judge exactly how long they were going to take based on a lot of the lessons learned we had with STS-127's experience and what we learned from that, what we learned from our training on the ground. It was difficult to tell how well these were going to go, so we had book-kept 3 battery installations today. We managed to get far enough ahead that we went for a 4th battery, so we're ahead for tomorrow for the last EVA of this mission. Before we even got to the batteries, though, we had the cable issue with the camera on the orbiter boom. We started the EVA with this task. Steve stopped off at about the midpoint of the truss, jumped in a foot restraint. We brought the camera over to him, Tony did, and he plucked the cable out of the location where it was stuck near a hard stop, tie wrapped it to itself, and a quick check out of the camera demonstrated that that was sufficient to give us full functionality of that camera back. So the orbiter boom is back in a good config. Then we went into the batteries. We finished up the batteries and cleaned up the worksite quickly enough that we were able to give a go for them to go back to the antenna that we were trying to work on EVA 1, and they managed to fix that as well. So we had a really successful EVA today. We're all incredibly excited. I don't think Mission Control could be any more proud. And inside the station, TJ was working on some maintenance of our oxygen generation system. Soichi was working on a lot of water samples and science, and Tracy was working on getting the crew out the door and back in again. So the whole crew was real busy today, and it was a really successful day. Tomorrow, both crews have fairly light days. The shuttle crew will be working on transfer mostly in the morning, and then they'll have the afternoon off. And the station crew will be working on some science, some transfer, and some maintenance activities as well. And that will set us up in preparation for a very busy day on EVA 3, Flight Day 8. And that about sums it up.
Lisa.
Thank you. As Emily said, I mean, today was just an incredible EVA. We accomplished more than we ever hoped going out the door. It's also a tribute to just how hard our crews train and how well the ground and the on-orbit teams work together. Going out the door, as Emily said, we had altered our timeline to have Steve go out and pluck the cable and wire tie it back to itself on the boom. In order for that to happen and keep the EVA moving, we still wanted to get a jump on our P6 battery prep. So Bueno went ahead and headed out to the P6 truss and performed tasks that nominally would have been Steve's. So the cross-training that we did through our training flow just paid off there. Bueno was able to get a jump on moving the foot restraints from the other side of the truss where 2JA STS-127 had done the battery R&R work. And then by the time Steve had finished the cable repair and was able to head out, we were well over, probably about halfway through that task, and were able to pick up almost on our nominal timeline by that point. The crew then went into temp stowing the battery as we had planned, pulled the first battery out of the truss, temp stowed it down there on the bottom or nadir side of the truss, and is actually still there right now. And we will plan to put that battery back into our carrier on EVA 3. And then what can I say about the battery R&Rs? The crew just worked together flawlessly. They showed great teamwork. All of their calls were crisp and clean, and they helped each other. When one guy had nothing but battery in his face, the other guy was helping him, guide the battery either into the truss or back into the pallet. Just flawless execution of the EVA, like I said, better than we could have hoped for. Towards the end of the EVA then, we cleaned up. That all went really well. We left our tool bags out there for use again on EVA 3 as we continue to R&R the last 2 batteries to go into the truss from the pallet. When we came back in, since we did have a little bit of time and our consumables were still looking good on the spacesuits, we had given the crew a heads up before we went out the door that we would probably, or not probably, that we would like to take a look at the S-Gant given time, and crew's attitude was great. They were feeling good, so we sent them to the airlock to retrieve the tools necessary in a bag to take a look at the S-Gant, and they went up there, again, Bueno doing a task that he had not nominally trained for, but we had done some cross-training because you just never know how things are going to go up in space, and again, they just worked together really well. We're able to get those bolts torqued back down. We didn't see any motion in the dish when we did our wiggle test. And we're given the go to remove the gimbal locks. So as far as I know, now that piece of hardware, our new 14-foot structure up the center of the truss there, should be good to go for checkouts later in the stage. And then crew came back inside, talked to them afterwards. They're feeling good, and we're ready to go perform EVA 3. I did bring a little prop with me. Everybody thinks, oh, you fix the cable on that boom, and it seems like a little thing, but the effort put into just putting a wire tie on a cable up in space is much greater than if you just had to go put a wire tie on something in your garage. And you can see this portion of it is the part that actually got put onto the boom, but then we had to cut that part of it, which creates a loose object up in space, which is never desirable. And then you also have to go through and create a tether loop. So we have tape, Kapton tape here, and then another wire tie that created that loop. So those pieces are actually still outside now in one of our trash bags. Zoom back out, there you go. And we'll retrieve those when we bring our bags back inside on EVA 3. Anyway, I'm just as happy as can be. Like I said, the guys performed flawlessly, and we're ready to go for EVA 3.
Okay, we'll take questions here in Houston. We also have reporters on the phone bridge. Mark?
Thank you, Mark Carreau for Aviation Week. I'm just wondering during the third spacewalk if there are other activities you can add to it if the first 2 battery changes go as well as all 4 went today.
Yeah. Okay. We actually, where we are now for EVA 3, remarkably enough, is back to our original plan. Originally, we had planned to R&R 2 batteries in the third EVA, do a full cleanup of the P6 truss, which we will now do, and then retrieve the grapple fixture from the payload bay. So all of those items will be in the timeline for EVA 3, and then we also have a couple of get-ahead tasks, reconfiguring an ammonia jumper. It doesn't have any ammonia in it right now, just nitrogen, and stowing some of our EVA tools. As we perform EVAs, things tend to come inside, so we need to take some of our tools and put them in our external toolboxes.
Bill Horowitz, CBS. This may be a question for Rob. Is there an update from MMT on inspections and any thinking along those lines?
I'll leave Emily to talk to that.
That's fine, too.
Yeah, I checked in before coming over here from the control center, and this morning they didn't officially make, or this afternoon, I guess, they didn't officially make a decision. As I understand it, the challenge that folks are having is that we've been gathering imagery from a variety of sources we're not used to using for clearing the vehicle for entry. For example, Garrett took some fabulous photos while he was stuck on the arm the other day, and they're using those as part of the data set that they're using to confirm that the vehicle is in tip-top shape. As I understand it, the vehicle is looking great, but because it's an unusual set of data in terms of it's not from the usual sources, not from the usual procedures, folks are wanting to take their time to make sure that they're getting all of the information that they need to make those decisions with. So meanwhile, we do have folks still looking at whether we could fit in what amount of inspection would fit into the Flight Day 9 timeline without having any violations of our rules in terms of keeping the crew up too long or having too many work hours in the day. But I expect a decision tomorrow formally to determine whether we'll do any further inspection during the docked mission, or now that the boom camera is fully functional and you expect to get a fully nominal post-undock late inspection, it's possible that they'll decide to forego any further imagery during the flight and just rely on that late inspection.
Okay, thanks. And for Lisa, maybe, or for you, and I'm not sure which, looking down the road, we were talking about get-ahead items before this thing started. If you get what you've got planned on EVA 3 done, can you give me a sense of what's left out there? I mean, I can remember lots of EVAs where things have fallen off, and things that you might add to 133, for example, which I know there aren't if Spacewalk's officially planned for that mission, but they may add some, I guess. What sort of things will still remain after this flight that you'd like to get done?
Not a good feel for what's on the list right now.
I would characterize the list of what's remaining. There's not a lot of the same kinds of tasks you've been seeing that are normally associated with joint missions, the big installation tasks or the big fix tasks. We've got an EVA currently on the books for this summer that's supposed to take the PDGF the grapple fixture we're bringing in from the payload bay on Flight Day 8, and after making some modifications to it inside the space station, it'll go back outside to get installed on the Zarya module. So it's kind of smaller tasks like that are left on the list. So beyond the kind of removal and replacement, or like the battery changeouts we're doing are a maintenance task for the most part. There are some maintenance tasks like that, I think, that are out there on the list to be done at some point, but none that are real urgent that I'm aware of.
Robert?
Hi, Robert Perlman with collectspace.com. For Lisa, I think, given how simple the tie wraps look, can you give just a sense of how many people were involved in developing that? Were there competing designs, and how long that process took?
I wouldn't say there was competing designs. There was, I can't give you an exact number, but there was a large number of people involved in the design of the tie wrap. We actually had people out in the KSC area that had been out there to watch the launch, and we were able to call on some of those folks. It turned out that the pan-tilt unit flight hardware was already out at KSC, so we were able to utilize some of those folks out there immediately. I think on Sunday we were able to get them in, or Saturday, I can't remember which day it was at this point. I think it was Saturday, and get them over there to start looking at the hardware and start working a fix right there with the actual flight hardware. And then we had a full team of people, EVA people anyway, starting to work packages and put it together with us. And you have one team working the outside fix, actually how to install the tie wrap. There's another team working to develop, what the crew needs to do inside, what tools need to be gathered. Since we wouldn't typically interface with the boom or that laser, there was a whole host of inhibits and safety precautions that had to be considered. So there's quite a fair number of people involved in even something that seems to be a very simple task.
Okay, let's go to the phone bridge now for questions. Clara Moskowitz, space.com.
Yeah, hi. This is a question for Emily. Can you talk a little bit about what the crew will be doing with the MRM-1 module tomorrow? I understand they'll be installing an air duct, but if you could offer a few more details about that, that'd be great.
Certainly. We'll start out with a leak check of the interface between MRM-1 and the Zarya module. Once we've confirmed that interface is solid, we'll open up the hatches, and then Oleg is going to sample the air and then put in an air filter and close the hatch back up, or maybe not solidly closed, but just close the volume so that the air filter can do its thing for a number of hours. Then they'll install, as you said, the ductwork that allows for ventilation to flow from the Zarya module into MRM1 and back out again. And I think that's most of what they're going to be doing tomorrow. And then later in the mission, they'll install some clamps, one last set of structure to ensure a good physical mate between the module and the station. And then at the very end of the mission, we'll start getting out the cargo carriers from inside the module and begin unpacking the module at least a little bit. We don't have a lot of space inside the ISS right now with 6 extra people and all of their luggage. So we won't actually unload the module yet, and it's full of U.S. cargo, so it's destined for the space that's very busy right now. But they're going to get started on organizing what's inside of it so that they can quickly unpack it after undock.
Thanks. Also, you mentioned that the crew will be working on transfer activities in the morning. I was just wondering sort of what kind of cargo they'll be transferring over.
Let's see. We've got a number of kind of maintenance items that are coming up. We've got a new absorbent bed for our carbon dioxide removal assembly. That actually is going to get installed tomorrow afternoon in our spare carbon dioxide removal assembly. We have a lot of the standard things, some food as I understand it. We've got some spare parts. We've got some pieces of our regenerative life support system. Trying to think what other big items. It's a lot of bags full of a lot of kind of the cats and dogs you need for 6 people living in space, to be honest.
Great, thanks. That's all for me.
Okay, Marcia Dunn of the AP is next. Marcia?
Yes, hello. I'm wondering if either of you was surprised to learn that little green tie, wire tie, was the culprit for all the hanging up of the boom equipment on the end. And was that wire tie meant to be there?
I wouldn't say that the wire tie that we saw moving around was the cause of the problem. Once Steve pulled the cable out and then they started moving the unit around, we found that cable that was already installed and the cable and the tie that we added were maybe not in locations that you would design the system to be in. But I wouldn't say that tie caused the problem.
No, I think it was definitely clear, at least just from looking at it, that tie didn't cause the problem. Because if you looked at the way those wires came out of that connector, where that one tie was coming from, it may have constrained the motion somewhat, but what caused the initial problem was the cable that we wire tied was actually wedged into a couple of hard stops on the rotation mechanism.
Do you have any idea yet how that all happened to be? What was the root cause of all this?
I haven't seen the results of any even preliminary investigations into that. I know that folks are going back and looking at photos of the unit while it was still at the Cape, and they'll be looking to determine at what point in time the cable was in that configuration, and then they can try to work backwards from there to determine how it got that way.
Thanks a lot. That's all.
Okay, Mark Kirkman up next.
Hi, Mark Kirkman, Interspace. I think I got 3 questions, all for Emily. First, I'd like to follow up on Clara's question about MRM ingress. I saw a note earlier that Oleg was preparing some protective gear or garments. I was just wondering if you can explain what that entails.
Absolutely. Anytime we ingress a new module, whether it's a Russian module, a U.S. module, or from any of our international partners, in case there were bits and pieces of what we call FOD, foreign object debris, that were in the module and in the 1G environment and you didn't happen to catch them, once of course you get to 0G, then they're bouncing around all over the place. So we take standard precautions every time we do an ingress to put on eye protection. In some cases we'll put on a mask, and it's really just to protect the crew members from any flakes or even something as small as a screw or flakes of paint or tape or any of the kind of things that you work with when you're building something, to prevent that kind of thing from getting in your eyes or getting inhaled accidentally.
My next question is about the cold spare status of the antenna. During the pre-flight briefings, I think you actually went into this, but somehow I must have tuned you out. What exactly do you mean by cold spare? How cold is it in terms of how long does it take to get that antenna up and running if you need to, and are you able to do any kind of functional checks of it before you put it in the spare status?
We will. Right now, the configuration on the space station is such that the cabling inside the vehicle is not yet set up to allow the system to work fully. Those cables will be installed here in the next several weeks after undock. They're on a long list of activities that the expedition crews have to execute. So what we mean by a cold backup is that you don't have a software functionality, or in this case even connectivity, to automatically fail over from one system to the next. In this case, what we have to do is if we have a failure of our existing KU band system, we would instruct the crew to disconnect some connectors inside the laboratory module, move those over to some different points and plug them into a different place, and at that point we'd be able to activate the system. So right now there is power and data connectivity to the module or to the unit that we have confirmed. We'd confirmed that after the first EVA. We do still have a couple of steps left to verify that the gimbals, that you were able to gimbal the dish and direct the dish as we desire. We can do that in its current configuration. Then we'll do a full functional checkout of the system this summer after we get those cables installed on the inside of the station.
My next question, just want to know if you've learned anything more about the CNC dropout on Monday. Do you still believe it was the cap removal, or do you have another view of that now?
Yes, I think we're zeroing in that the cap was the issue. I haven't actually myself seen the details of which bus exactly it was and how the computer software is designed to respond to that one or multiple buses that are flowing through the one cable. How the loss of those buses would have caused it. Although, in general, if the command and control computer loses several buses, and on a given bus you'll have several remote terminals, several entities that it's communicating with on a data bus. If it loses everything off of a given bus, then it knows that that bus has a problem. If it loses multiple buses, then it suspects that it has a problem, and so then it'll fail over. So I think at this point we're thinking that there were several buses that got too many errors on them, and that's what caused the MDM to fail.
All right, that's all I have. Thank you very much for your time today.
All right, thanks, Mark. Any questions back here? Don't think we have any more questions, so we'll close with a couple of programming notes. Atlantis' crew begins its sleep period a short time from now at 4:50 p.m. Central Time. Right after that, we'll go into our flight day highlights to highlight all of the activities on EVA-2 today at 5 p.m. Central Time. Those highlights will be replayed every hour on the hour throughout the crew's sleep period. The high-definition highlights of the day's activities will be on the NASA HD TV channel beginning at 9 p.m. Central Time tonight. The ISS Orbit 3 Flight Director, Scott Stover, who's on console at this hour, will offer his view of upcoming activities on the ISS Flight Director Update interview from console at 11 p.m. Central Time this evening. And a wake-up call for Atlantis' crew for Flight Day 7 comes early Thursday morning at 12:50 a.m. Central Time. You can follow all the activities of the shuttle and station crew members on our website at www.nasa.gov. With that, we'll go back to Mission Control and continuing coverage of the STS-132 mission. Thanks very much.